I'm going to record this on this computer, so if anyone would like a copy of this, just feel free to ask. So I would like to presence the holy idea, the holy virtue of type 1, which is an inherent goodness. It is holy perfection. It is being in this world with a certain nobility. I'm gonna mute. There's some noise happening back there for now. Okay. So I'd like to presence again, being in this world, being in the sacredness of this world, being in awareness of our and others' nobility, embodying a sense of serenity, embodying a sense of acceptance of all that is, exactly the way things are unfolding. And let's just drop in with ourselves for a few moments and find how that lives inside of us. And noticing the body, we are in the belly triad. We are in the instinctual triad this evening. So notice any tightness you might have in your neck or anywhere where there might be any tightness whatsoever. And let your attention go there and just breathe into that part of your body. And let it release. Well, thank you. Well, welcome everybody. So everyone is in the room. This is the first time we've done this way. So first, I'm going to begin presencing some of the qualities of type 1, and this will be coming from some of my studies with Beatrice Chestnut, some Andrea Isaacs, some Russ Hudson, some Ben Saltzman. I've been exposing myself to quite a cornucopia of Enneagram masters lately, and it's been fantastic. And so what I want to presence for us is the impact of subtype and how that expresses. That has my attention these days. I think it profoundly alters how a person shows up, how the personality shows up, and also the holy idea, which I hope it felt delicious for a couple minutes to be with those qualities in our little meditation. We could have stayed there for longer, but we wouldn't get anything done. Excuse me. It just comes with me. So, okay. So, type 1. Type 1 is part of the belly triad. The anger is the emotion that tends to be what's called the passion or the core suffering. And it converts to serenity. It converts to the holy idea of holy perfection and nobility. And what we will speak about tonight is a little bit about that and how we get from when we're contracted back to the state of holy perfection. Mentioning anger, it's not uncommon for type 1 to not be aware of the feeling of anger. And evidently, a type 1's childhood has a lot to do with the degree to which anger is allowed to be recognized in themselves. So, and that depends on how much criticism, complaining, and or abuse happened, for that matter. The what's called the mental fixation is resentment. That's more of the contraction at the mind level. That also can convert to perfection. Saying a little bit more in general about the holy ideas, holy perfection, it's a profound acceptance for things just the way they are, a recognition that we're living in the divine unfolding of everything. Ben, over this past weekend, said that type, I will sometimes call it the mechanism, but that type is the shadowy mimic of the holy idea. I love that. Type is the shadowy mimic of the holy idea.
Any type?
Any type. Any type. And I will refer back to that as I'm going through more. So as a 1, which I'm not a 1, but let's just make believe that I am for now. Could be fun. My attention goes to what is not right. All the judgment and criticism is an effort to get back to that holy perfection. It's like a drive. Some of the key beliefs that a one has is that everything can be improved and everything should be improved. Ones can be afraid of their anger. The type sees it as being bad. There could be a merry sunshine appearing on the outside, especially if one has a two-wing, but underneath really seething. Upon losing oneself in anger, it could be crippling to see oneself in this way. I'm going to speak a little tiny bit right now to subtypes. I'm going to yes.
Just give her a brief overview. So.
Keep going. Oh.
Because I don't.
Okay, so for anyone who doesn't have much familiarity with subtypes, I will just briefly go into subtypes. But what I want to say about subtypes is that they are best known blended with the type itself. I almost have some resistance to speak to it generally because it looks so different depending on the alchemy of the type. It really truly is like this, in my opinion. I was using this example with, I think, Annalisa today, that if type 1 is a pure color blue and your subtype, which I will explain in a moment for anyone who doesn't know, is the color red, let's say 1-to-1, then it really creates the person of purple. You're going to be a different, it actually creates its own type, its own unique way of moving through the world. So imagine every subtype was a different color. So if you put yellow with blue, you're going to get green, right? So I just want to say subtype isn't something that gets added on to the type. It literally causes like a almost not literally chemical, but an alchemical shift in how the person shows up and how the type itself expresses itself. And I am intentionally referring to type like it's this separate thing inside of us, because in my study, in my experience with the Enneagram, this is a mechanism. It is something that lives within us that we get to witness, that we get to have a say in how it expresses itself. And in that, and yet it has this drive that leads each type to its holy expression, to its divine expression, right? So there is something magnificent about it, and yet at the same time, it isn't us. So there's a tremendous amount of freedom in that at the level of where the type contracts. So it's in us, it isn't us. We're able to have it rather than it having us. So, and having this distinction is really important, because you don't take a lot of what I'm about to read that isn't so much fun personally. It's not personal. It is the way the type is trying to protect itself in the world, exert itself in the world for the betterment of mankind. So, for themselves, for that matter. So just a little tiny bit about subtype. So self-preservation subtype is how one focuses their attention to secure their safety in the world through physical comfort, through having their attention on their physical space. It could be their body, it could be their home. Their sense of self recharges through their attention being on their body, their wellness, their home, their finances, the stuff of life. It's an orientation around comfort almost at the visceral skin level. Can be very, very sensitive beings. One-to-one, which I'm a wonderful example of energetically, is someone who finds their safety through connection with the other. We love to have eye contact. In having the eye contact, we have connection. I have a sense of knowing the other. Having a sense of knowing the other instills a certain feeling of safety and comfort. And there can be, if I'm off, I will call my friends and I'll hear myself speak, and it creates a certain, in this bonding, there is a certain safety. And yet, again, with any of these, it's all about we all have a little bit of all of these in us, but when we started in life, there was an over-reliance on one of these ways of having of having our being focus our attention to become emotionally secure. So then the third type is called the social subtype, and social has nothing to do with socializing, absolutely nothing. It has to do with social systems, and these systems could be one's family. It could be creating teams. It could be being on a board. Your identity, your sense of safety comes from the role that you have in your family, the role that you have in a group. And by creating these functioning parliaments and organizations in the world, it secures our safety if we band together for a certain purpose. Okay? So there's certain types that's their primary thing, and that can be really interesting sometimes. If you have two different, this is where a lot of misunderstandings can happen in partnerships and friendships, for that matter, because it's a drive. You have a drive to secure your safety. So unless you're conscious of that, you could be married to somebody, and then 7 nights of the week you're out at board meetings and forget that you have a family, right? Now, if you have two of the same subtype, then you're both off together maybe. But nonetheless, having these distinctions can really create a lot more understanding of what the other person needs, and create a lot more peace and intimacy. So I'm now going to share the screen with, let's see, what do I have here? Preview type 1. So these are a couple slides that Beatrice Chestnut shared recently. The three kinds of type 1s. The self-preservation one are the perfectionists, imagine like a French painter, the perfectioniste, high sense of precision and detail. As a matter of fact, if you look at this, it's, the perfectionist is way off the chart. It's beyond 100% at the perfectionist scale. That's the quality of attention they will bring to a project. Social ones are perfect. I'm not sure that we have any social ones in the house today, so to speak, but the social ones are the ones that are being perfect. They are the perfect demonstrators of the right way of being in the world. They are out in the world this way, and are upholding, modeling a way of being that they therefore then expect you to follow along.
Martha Stewart.
Martha Stewart, very right.
I don't know.
And Kimberly saying Gandhi might be a social one as well. One-to-one ones. They, have a tendency to perfect others. Are the reformers in the world. They know the right way, and if you let them, they can show you the right way to be yourself. Can also make awesome counselors, psychotherapists, and would be a tendency to be in that profession, but not limited to that. Let me down with that one. So here we go. Type 1. These are the two subtypes we have the most of tonight. So type 1, the perfectionist, the reformer. Early coping strategy. Monitor themselves to do it right. Improve things. Focus of attention, right and wrong. Detecting error to correct it. Making things right, perfect, better. Suppressing anger and impulses. Strengths. Hardworking, reliable, quality-oriented, ethical, responsible, persistent effort, honesty. Motto, my way is the right way. Although they may not be saying that out loud. Blind spots, developmental path. Own anger and its effects. Negative impact of criticism. Need for play and fun. On our panel, we'll activate the panel. We'll engage at some point, hopefully soon. And Annalisa is begins at 1-1-1. Hi, Annalisa.
Hello.
Hello. And self-preservation 1, worry. Worry can also be a subtle anxiety. Okay. For those out there who are very Enneagram savvy, there can also be like a 6-1 lookalike, right? So self-preservation 6 is, it's like, oh, isn't 6 the type that's known for worry and anxiety? Yes. However, it's motivated by different concerns, and often it's felt differently, really, really differently. I was just in an Enneagram course over the weekend and was with, we got together in groups, and there was a self-preservation 6, and there was the anxiety was palpable in the eyes, the skin. It was difficult for me to. It was honestly a little bit challenging for me to be with the amount of anxiety that was coming up in this person. Of course, we were asking her to take the microphone and speak, but nonetheless, I just want to speak to the difference of how, when we are going to be being with our self-preservation 1s, you might look at them and say, where's the worry? Where's the anxiety? Not so apparent. But I promise you, if they dig deep, you're going to find it.
Because I gotta go. Sorry.
Okay.
A little bit of anxiety.
Okay.
I'll talk to you.
Come back if you would like.
Thank you.
So self-preservation 1, worry. Focusing on perfecting themselves, controlling everything in the environment. The most responsible person in the family, even as children. Very self-critical, less critical of others. Have more anxiety, survival fear. Worry about everything, try to control or fix things that don't need fixing. Anger is most repressed in this type 1. They are warm, friendly, and benevolent. Can look like self-preservation 6s. So I am going to, I have some other additional notes here about the subtype. I'm going to read it because I want to emphasize there tonight. So again, a little bit more on self-preservation. The heat of anger converts into warmth. They put a lot of pressure on themselves to be perfect, don't like to live by other people's should. They are already doing that themselves. I see you smiling, Odelia. 1-1-1, zeal is another word that can be affiliated with the 1-1-1. And usually I like to speak, I love also to speak in terms of temperature, because there's a real energetic to the Enneagram. The 1-1-1s, hot. Social subtype 1, cool. And the self-preservation 1, warm. So back to the 1-1-1. The reformer, trying to change society. Anger potentiates desire, a kind of connection to a higher calling. Their attention can be more so on the outside. anger-driven zeal to make things better in the world. Love the feeling of team and a partner, love getting to the truth, and love to debate, loves to be with someone who knows who they are, loves to be with someone who can pull their own weight. Gandhi, Ralph Nader, through crusading on seatbelt, and there you go, consumer protections, some Clean Air Act. Elliot Spitzer, those are one-to-one ones, evidently. Social one. So we'll have a little bit less on that tonight, but I will speak to it. Rigidity, non-adaptability tends to be more of the feel for the social one. Focus on learning and knowing the right way of doing things. They can relax a little more because they figure out the perfect way and they relax into that. They're the more intellectual type. Their anger turns into cool. Your anger turns into knowing the right way, and they can appear aloof. This is the combination that can look like type 5. Moving on, I'm going to share a little bit from my course with Russ. I love these notes. The type 1 represents. I'm gonna mute on again. Okay. All right. Type 1 represents what the inner critic is stepping in for. I love that. Type 1 represents what the inner critic is stepping in for, right? I love that. That really speaks to something. Stepping in for to create, stepping in for to fix, stepping in for, to create. It would have a higher, I think it speaks for itself. We feel this, we feel the inner critic in our bodies and in our hearts. When we are more present, we notice an inherent goodness in things. There are things worth going through difficulty for, and we feel the nobility in life and others. It's hard to put ourselves down because we trust that we are speaking to something good and real. We realize that we need each other to deepen, to connect, and to ground. When we are in present to this, as ones, we can feel resentful. Society can throw out a lot of platitudes, but when life is really difficult, it's almost easier to recognize the sacredness of life. When we are present enough to bring in this dimension, we bring as ones in this nobility. This allows our best selves to come forth. It calls forth an awareness that we would never want to talk down to anyone or anything, especially ourselves. We step into our Dharma, the place where our soul is inviting us to be and to contribute. I don't know about you, but as I'm present to all of this, I am one goosebump. If this goodness is what we live for, then why would we turn away from this? If we have experienced as one a very judgmental parent or guardian, have been the recipient of a lot of complaints, criticism, or being told that we didn't deserve love, there's inner critic structures that we then would develop. If we are already giving ourselves a hard time as a one, then we can be very scared, reactive, and defensive. It can mean that we are very poor at taking praise. If we're so hung up on our own self-improvement project, then there might not be any space to take in praise. So there's value in inhabiting our own North Star. We develop an inner tuning fork, the search for our sacred tuning fork. As long as we are tuning into the critic, then we'll align with a false story. If we explore our emotional reactivity, it can be a doorway to dissolving this in this way. The inner critic is a stand-in for a deeper quality. Our conscience is a quality of the heart. We know when we are oriented towards something true and real. We also know when we are betraying ourselves. When inner critic structures are working, we disconnect from others and from parts of ourselves that we think are bad and wrong. So there's value in, one question that was a reflective question I'll put out, not for us to answer right now, but this is more of a journaling question for later. How, as a young child, was I taught about right and wrong, good and bad? I'll repeat that again. So if you want to journal on this later, how as a young child was I taught about right and wrong and good and bad? How would the quality of my life have been different if I would have been in touch with the essence of nobility? This goodness and nobility is the greatest gift of the one. And they have this in there as their greatest vulnerability. The passion of type 1, as it was spoken to by Oscar Ichazo, is resentment. The difficulty in the heart is frustration, disappointment, expressed through gritted teeth and sarcasm. It's not often expressed as anger, but it feels like tightness, frustration, exasperated quality. At the core of this passion and passion in this context is one's core suffering. At the core, it can feel like a deep grief, a grief-stricken heart, a sense that the goodness is gone from the world, just gone. There's something fundamentally screwed up about humanity. It can be a crushing state. And the anger in the one then mobilizes us into right action or action period. So many ones feel this way. Maybe no one will listen, but I have to give it a try, whatever it is. The habit of the one's mind is the judging mind. I think I know what is right and wrong. Once we know what's right and wrong, we lose a deeper connection with inner wisdom. Sometimes we may argue about something that feels empty. Our very positionality limits our discernment. And then what comes is what Russ refers to as the wake-up call. It's thinking that it's all up to me. So one may think, maybe they will do a crappy job. When we are thinking this way, we feel frustrated, agitated in our heart. We tighten our jaw, our neck, our trapezoid muscles, and the body is forcing a kind of integrity. And no type behavior is sustainable. These distorted and compensating patterns are telling lies about who we are. This rigidity and affecting is unsustainable. Practicing the wake-up call can actually relax into healthy parts of the 7. This is where one's cut loose, rebel, become lighthearted, loose, young. This is the part of the one that longs to be a child again and feel like, and they can feel like they never had a childhood. They learn that they love to be surprised. They know they are discovering different ways of being. They are discovering what's wanting to happen in the moment when instead of what they think should be happening. They will develop a curiosity that hasn't been there before. And notice that there is more than one way of doing things. There's no longer categorizing something as good or bad. They begin relaxing into the sacredness in everything. This affords ones a great capacity to know the whole of something, not just the parts of it. So an exercise that I'll share this is not to do now, but I think that it's a great reflection piece, is to speak to the inner critic with this question or the statement, thank you for trying to keep me safe and to create a guideline for understanding this world. Unfortunately, the approach of criticizing ... and then you fill in the blank. Another wonderful repeating question to support ones to return to themselves is, tell me the way I feel the sacredness of this moment. So the last thing I will reference here, since I feel like we have a lot of 9 wings in the room with our ones, I took some notes that where Russ had shared coaching a one with a 9 wing. So here were Russ's suggestions. For suggestions for ones, giving themselves room to play. Find things that excite you, not something that you're passionately focused on. There is your vocation or calling, which ones tend to know what that is. If ones are doing what they tend to know, if ones aren't doing then they tend to be unhappy people. Avocation makes ones very well-rounded people. Getting over the need to rationalize. If an activity brings creativity or simply fun, these elements are really, really important. Ones tend to care more. Ones tend to care more than getting personal credit for the goodness that has happened. They care more about what's happening than for them to get credit. It's more important that what they care about is making a difference. This can be a doorway to begin to play. Ones appreciate beauty and excellence. If they can be more acknowledging of what lights their soul up, take an art class just because it feeds and nourishes your soul. Things may have been laid aside. These are things that may have been laid aside to take care of more serious business. So I think that is a pretty comprehensive laying of the territory. So much more can be said, but I feel like that gives us a good feel for the one territory. Now let me see how I bring you all back to the screen here. Give me 1 second, please. Stop share. Oh gosh, this is like Zoom for Dummies. It's fabulous. Okay. All right. So my friends, Odelia, Annalisa, thank you for making yourself available with us this evening. Can you hear?
Yes, it's a pleasure. Thank you, Gerise.
Thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity, and the conversation we had last night was very enlivening.
Yes, it was. And Annalisa, can we hear you?
I hope so.
Okay, yes. Okay, terrific. All right, so I just shared a lot. Odelia, you just had a lot of energy about our conversation yesterday. Would you like to share? You can share anything. I just shared a lot of information. There were a lot of really insightful moments that happened in our conversation. So if you want to speak to anything, anything you say is going to be valuable.
All right. Cool. What struck me today as you talked about the one-to-one compared to the self-press is that I have seen myself in the past as a one-to-one. And the reasoning for that was that I feel I get a lot of energy from being in conversation with another. And as we went through the different subtypes yesterday, the self-pres having the subtitle worry didn't seem to fit in my experience about myself. And I shared with you that in many areas I feel very confident and competent. And so I wasn't really in touch with the worry part. And by your questioning, what I received was that I was very hypervigilant in my childhood. I basically wanted to avoid that my dad would go into a closure and a disconnection from me. And so the hypervigilant was to follow what I knew would be approved of by him and to avoid any behavior that could create a trigger and then would give me the discomfort of feeling disconnected and ultimately questioning myself and thinking I'm bad. So that was one thought that that was intriguing to me, because I had not tracked the worry, anxiety, and I really appreciated you working with me with that. And there was just another part to that. And the other part was, as we talked about the one having very clear values and standards and not going easily into questioning and self-doubt. And so one of the distinctions that was very clear to me was, if I couldn't see something through and it looked like there was a high risk of me not succeeding, that I just wouldn't do it. And so it has been a process for me to step more and more into the unknown, because I am more and more okay with myself, to learn instead of needing to meet certain standards and ideals that initially I think were outer imposed, but then became my own.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's sort of a certain bite, and if there are questions around it, or if Annalisa has something from her subtype that, you know, is different, then we can maybe engage more, or have whatever direction wants to show up.
Thank you. That is crystal clear. Really crystal clear. What I would love to do now, though, is stay with the feeling. You were so presencing the quality of how self-preservation one can look with in your sharing. I'd like to flesh that out a little bit more.
Great.
Bit more. So I also want to just put out into the room, Kimberly, if you want to come into the hot seat and share. You open to riffing in a, okay, anything, you know, listening to Odelia's sharing, how when you were little, did you see this getting cultivated? How does it express itself now? You know, we can just stay right there right now. Let's just get the feeling of the subtype as for you in the room. And then I think we'll move on to get a sense of the one-to-one with Annalisa. You want to step in?
Mm-hmm.
So I very much related to the comment of being a very hypervigilant child. I am educated in psychology, and so there's a very well-known book in that field called The Drama of the Gifted Child by Alice Miller. And she talks about children that go through very difficult childhoods, often dangerous childhoods. They develop a heightened intuitive ability, and that enables them to really gauge, when the other shoe is going to drop,
Mm-hmm.
moment. So that definitely was my childhood home environment. My mom, probably a 4, Enneagram Type, very low functioning 4. She was bipolar and attempted suicide.
Mm.
Time, we were growing up as children. So me being the eldest of 4, and she married my dad when she was 18. They were basically children, and then she left him, and then she remarried and had 3 more children with her second husband. So I am 6, 7, and 8 years older, respectively, of my younger siblings. My mom had them with her second husband. So at the point that she'd given birth to her 4th child, she was emotionally just a mess. And so I early on started mothering her and taking care of her, and then also started to parent the younger children and take care of the household. And she was a rager. She threw things, knives. She, so again, the barometer for danger was always, just acutely on. So that was my need to survive. And I read recently, it was such a perfect metaphor for what happens, I think, to all of us as children, when our essential nature is not acknowledged and nurtured and mirrored by our primary caregivers. The wounding that begins is so incredibly painful to the child that unconsciously they begin to protect that. And the metaphor that I read was, it's like you put on a cast. So there's a broken bone,
Mm-hmm.
and the cast is protecting the broken bone. And so it's very necessary. But after a while, the cast has to come off. Otherwise, the bone would atrophy. And so I like that, because if we don't at some point recognize that who we have identified ourselves to be is really like that cast that has concealed our true essence, then, we walk around handicapped. So, when I left home and, began to study psychology to figure out, what made people do such hurtful things. And so that's when I started to, go into my own analysis, person. But I've learned that the cast is, it's very difficult to completely remove, because we go back to the pattern, we go back to our habit or to our trance. And my specialty is archetypal psychology, so I can easily see each of these Enneagram types as an archetype. And it really helps me to put it in that context. So if you know anything about archetypes, they're patterns. There's 1,000,001 patterns in the universe that, will define any given archetype. So I can very much relate to the archetype of the 1, which is the reformer, the perfectionist. But as with all archetypes, they can be highly actualized, and they can be functioning completely in shadow. So I have learned to differentiate and have developed my own ways of addressing my shadow material when it does come up.
Yeah. I'd love to ask you a question. So, and this is also for, ones that may listen to this panel. When you were little, when did you first recognize that you were going around with a cast on, that this cast was on? And when and how did you, what practices have you had that have cracked it open or peeled it back and given you moments of freedom? And I hear your studies were part of it. First, through the mind, understanding what would have your mother do what she did. That was part of it. But then how did you also keep it off to begin to play, begin to have some freedom with yourself?
Well, I was very blessed in my childhood to have had an aunt and an uncle who, in lieu of my biological father for the visitation arrangements, the divorce, they picked me up and I stayed with them. And they had no children, and so I became like their child. And with them, I had that experience of being fully seen. And, you know, how that brought forth that essential nature. The contrast, you know, between the two, going back to life with my mother and my stepfather and then going back to them. So that's when I think as a child, I began to get an inkling that, you know, I was leading a double life, so to speak. And then I don't know that I had this conscious recognition at the time, but I can remember a specific situation when I was probably 10. And one of my younger siblings, they had a friend that came to the door. And at that point, I had already developed a very fierce armor. And I went to the door, and
what is that armor for self-preservation? Please say, what does that armor look like? Because I would venture to guess you did not look like a counterphobic 6. So what did that armor look like?
Well, I can only imagine what it looked like the child that was on the other side of the door. Because I must have been so foreboding and seemingly impenetrable that the child broke down crying.
Oh, well, okay.
Because I don't know what I said, but all they wanted to do was play with their, you know, my younger sister or brother, whomever. And they started to cry and then went away. And so I have a remote memory of that. And as an adult, I've learned to be in my body because I recognize now as a child I was not in my body very often at all. And then when I went into adolescence, my stepfather began to abuse me sexually. So even more reason to dissociate from my body. So that's one of the things as an adult, and this has, you know, been ongoing for decades now, I've learned to inhabit my body and feel when I'm contracted, you know, feel the tightness. The anger that you refer to in me is a very visceral feeling. I mean, I can feel it, you know, just kind of like rolling up. And if I don't express it hopefully in a healthy way, it gets pushed back down and, becomes a symptom. And often the symptom is fatigue, exhaustion. So that's one of the ways. Another way that I work with shadow, is that kind of what you were asking? At this point in my life, Gerise and I were talking about this before class, connected to both the 7 and the 4, I would defend fiercely against the unhealthy expression of 4 because that was my mother. But as the veneer, going forward in life began to crack, and I could no longer defend against that, I found myself moving toward feeling depressed and hopeless and that malaise and that undercurrent of melancholy. And so I learned to transmute it creatively in some way, whether that would be through poetry or collage work or painting or dance. So I take the energy, and rather than denying it or repressing it, I express it in some sort of, creative fashion. And then I borrow from the 7, the child, sort of the child nature of the 7 to do these things. I have that collage over there, if you wouldn't mind. Both of those, Gerise, I just share. So I just put together this little collage before class because this represents a lot of, my shadow expression. So I've got Beat the Clock, Judge Judy, the suit of armor, the report card that has to have the A+ on it. You probably can't see this, but this is a woman sort of vomiting out, all of these phrases that the internal critic, is relentlessly offering. And this woman is like a female Atlas carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. So,
wow, what a great collage.
Yeah, and it's easy for me to do this because I've been doing this for so long, but it's remarkably helpful to get objectivity around these patterns that otherwise are just like, knee-jerk, automatic go-to patterns. And then I can, play with them and get lighthearted and laugh at the judge and poke at the armor, of the guard, the sentry, and allow myself to get a C- now and again. So, and the clock. I once heard, what's his name? He's married to Gangaji. Oh.
Eli Jackson Bear.
Yeah. Eli Jackson Bear once talked about the ones, and he talked about, he's so funny. He said, he was talking about the neuroses of all the types. And he said for the 1, it's time, money, and dirt. Could I relate to that? Time, there's, so much obsession about, being on time and is there enough time, the punctuality and being driven by the clock. And then the borderline obsessiveness about dirt, and then money, the survival again. So, and then this is a picture of me, and I wasn't quite 2, I don't think. My mom looks like she's 14. I don't know if you can see that. Yeah. But I wrote a poem about that because I'm always, working on this excavation sort of project of recovering my essence, and within that essence there's just unadulterated joy. And so I wrote a poem based on this photo called Back When My Joy Was Safe. Mm-hmm. And that too helps me really connect to the purity, the perfection, the innocence, of that divine child, which is inherent in all of us. So, yeah, that's a little bit of how I do it.
Fantastic. Thank you for putting that together.
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
That was beautiful. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Kimberly.
You're welcome. Were you able to see and hear that, Maureen?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, I loved it.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Maureen has a front row seat.
Oh.
So
Better.
So are we getting a little feel for self-preservation as the one expresses it? All right, 1 to 1, 1. Bring it on. Let's bring on the heat.
Well, I'm listening to everything that's being said, obviously, and the experiences that I had as a child were not that different in terms of the threats, the lack of safety, all of that. And the drama of the gifted child is one of my, personal Bibles as well. It was one of my early introductions to, putting the pieces back together. And the thing of the broken bone, that was also a very interesting metaphor for me, because I often think of my experience in childhood as one of experiencing a break. That there was before inhabiting a body, there was perfection, and somehow embodiment introduced a break, the separation, and there's almost this feeling of if I get too identified with being human, if I become too identified with the material physical world, well, those are two different things. But basically with being a physical being, then I'm aware of this dichotomy or paradox that we live in, right? Where there's an apparent separation, even though we're all whole and all one. And as a one, I experience that as the constant, ever-present challenge to be aware of and awake to this experience of the break that I experienced very, very young. And then finding my way back to remembering that that's part of being whole. There was never a break, right? But it felt like a break when I couldn't reach my parents. It felt like a break when they couldn't see me. It felt like a break when my, terrible things were happening that I couldn't do anything about. Mm-hmm. And so I internalized all of that to mean that I was broken. That if I could fix my brokenness, then I'd have happy parents and they would want me and it would all work. So this idea of the break and the separation is very internalized in me as the reason why the relationship doesn't work. And when I forget how deeply embodied I carry that, then I look at you.
Right.
And I see where you're broken and what needs to be fixed there. And I'm really good at that. Partly because if I can figure out how you're broken and I can help you fix that, then I can have the parent
Oops.
I need, and it never works. Actually, I come back to remembering to look at myself.
Can you say that one more time? The screen froze. If I can remember, usually people don't like it if I tell them what's wrong with them. I have to cultivate a little more finesse. I've spent many years working on that. But I'm usually not wrong, but how I say it is usually not right. And it's more in the delivery than it is in the perception, because people are often grateful for the perception, but are, like clobbered by the delivery. And because I'm so angry about it and I just want them to fucking fix it. So, that's where the relationship ultimately is so helpful and healing to me, because if somebody is on the receiving end of that kind of heat, that disappointment, that desperation, if somebody doesn't go away when I lose my center and they stay, they give me feedback and they say, the truth I'm hearing from you is interesting. I'm considering that, but how you're saying it
you're missing yourself. You're missing who you are. You're not owning the I can't say it. I hope I can say it. There's a heartbreak and a heartache so deep, and a loss and a grief so deep behind the anger that is driving the anger. Because that original break, that feeling of separation, of not being able to connect with my parents, not being able to have that, my sense of nobility and theirs all honored together, that we are all so magnificent and wonderful together in partnership, in a whole thing. That sense of break, that we all lost, that is so heartache, so much pain, that's what's underlying the anger. And it's a desperation really in relationship to come back into partnership, come back into union, come back into a sense of wholeness with the other. And I've learned that in order to do that, I have to do that in myself. That's the practice.
Thank you. That was so felt, and you really worked yourself right into a beautiful demonstration of the heat.
Yeah. I can't help it. When I really do connect to it, it's like, yeah.
The heat of the passion, the heat of the heartache, the heat of the pain. And
the heartache drives the heat. The heartache drives the heat. Yeah.
And that's beautiful because it's not often spoken about that way. You'll hear more how the anger drives fill in the blank, but actually the heartache is
It's what drives the anger.
What drives the anger.
Mm-hmm.
This is good.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very good.
So I would say that the practice for me, for being responsible for my behavior, and learning to find some acceptance of the grief, so that I can speak to you and talk to you about what I'm seeing or what I'd like to see different, or what I want or how I'm feeling. Reflection. I require time in nature. I require, quiet. It's an interesting thing for a one-to-one. You would think maybe that they need to be in relationship to other people a lot. And ultimately, to get a sense of myself, I do need the relationships with others. And then I need to take that information and that experience into solitude. And I need to do a lot of digesting. And it's a very physical process. It's very body-based. When I say digest, I actually really mean that it's very food related in terms of nourishment and nurturing. When another person tells me what they see, I'm quite comfortable telling you, that I think maybe you could make an adjustment here or adjustment there, and I think you might find yourself having a much better experience. If somebody would turn around and say that to me, I just love it when people, like, I already have it, like I already know, or like I know more than you do. Or I know more about you than you do. So, and I, of course, I'm a psychologist, so what does that tell you? But the fascinating thing about my work has been that I've learned more about being a one in that context, and about the subtypes in that context than in any other context in my life, because I get all types. I get all 27 types in my office, and I have to find, I can't just do full on, jealous heat. You know, when a delicate 6 comes in a traumatized state, you know, so I'm learning, and I get feedback, of course, you know, and I've lost clients. Yeah. So, you know. Yeah.
That was snort worthy.
It's very much how the offering is made, not so much the offering.
Okay, so in your body, so you're with somebody and you're triggered. You know it. Where do you first notice it in your body? And this is for other ones, right? You were saying you use food, you know, visceral. You probably don't start patting your cheeks in front of a client. How do you work with this? Where do you first notice it?
Well, it can happen a few different ways. Sometimes I'm super hypervigilant scanner, you know, well developed all through childhood. So I'm reading the other person. That's one of the things I'm doing. And I'm seeing that it's not landing, you know, it's not that, it's like I'm looking for a connection and I'm not getting one.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the things that I notice. The other thing I notice, so that's something to notice. What did you say?
You see it in the other first.
I don't always see it in the other first, but that can be feedback for me. Mm-hmm. Because I'm looking for the partnership, for the relationship, for the connection, mm-hmm. And if it's not happening, then I'm gonna, you know, reassess. Uh-huh. But there's also a feeling. For me, it's a lot in my digestive system and my breath. It's a clamping, a tightening, a squeezing, mm-hmm. And the healing for me is in all those practices that address that kind of tension. Mm-hmm. Because there's a lot of anxiety for a one-to-one around the possibility of not getting the connection. Mm-hmm. So there's a tension kind of under it all the time, is you don't want to go back into that grief. You don't want to go back to that feeling of, uh-oh, I can't get connected. So there's this kind of, and it's often perceived as a, you know, sort of uptightness, stick up your butt kind of thing, but it's really more, I think, a quality of anxiety that is suppressed or kind of wants to be hidden. I don't want anybody to actually know how desperate I am, mm-hmm. to actually reunite.
Thank you. When you are, you know, we could go in two different directions here. I would love to hear how you, there's two things you could take. I'll propose two, and if you come up with a better third, great. Let's say you're with a self-preservation 6 client, or your partner's a self-preservation 3, and then it's activated. You're getting hot, and an anxiety about the loss of connection is really activated. Can you speak to how you what do you consciously shift? How do you reel in your one-to-oneness to meet the self-preservation nature in the other? The how is this is a lifetime practice, right? So one of the things I notice is that I'll say something and it's not having the effect I thought it would. Like my husband is a self-pres 3. And I was speaking with I thought I was just being emphatic. I just thought I was like, I'm speaking right now. I'm just speaking with, did you know you were doing that? And I just mean it because it's like a fact, right? It seems obvious, and I was just saying it.
I thought I was being, just very clear. And he's like crushed by it. He's either crushed by it or pissed off or, what. And I'm like, oh, yeah. So I'm learning in the moment to to immediately not feel shame about it, not feel distress that I've been exposed, but to immediately use that opportunity to check and see if I'm afraid or in pain about if I need to connect in some way, or I'm afraid I'm not going to get what I need in this dynamic, instead of going to see what's wrong with him. Or what, what's your problem? I didn't mean anything by that. I could go that route, but I'm learning that, if somebody else is experiencing pain as a result of something I am in my relationship dynamic, I have to check and see if I'm in pain. I have to check and see if I'm, running some kind of fear. And I usually am. I always am.
And how easy is it as a one for you then to reveal what the pain is about? Are you able to do that in the moment? Do you need to take space? I'm getting better and better at it because my partner and I have been, we've been together over 20 years and we're working on this stuff. So he's giving me an opportunity to work on it. But no, there's still, opportunities every day that I could be more vulnerable and more open and more tender, first with myself and then with others in relationship. And that's an ongoing process of softening and accepting the grief and the losses of everyday life, the missing connections, the connections I'll never have that I didn't get when I was younger, that I'll never ever get. I used the example the other day with a friend of mine. They said, I never feasted at the banquet of mother love, and I will never taste those flavors. I will never eat those meals. I will never have that experience ever. And that's a big loss. There's parts of childhood I just didn't have. Right.
And and there is a resentment about that. There's an anger and disappointment about that, and an efforting to somehow reconstruct life so that it will provide that, instead of accepting the ways that life is providing that. There's so much good stuff to eat. It doesn't have to be
right. Mother's milk.
That banquet. There's so much other wonderful good food, and partaking of the morsels and the offerings of friends and clients. Everybody's offering is a bite of something yummy.
Yeah, you're reminding me. I have a phrase on this board here that the expression of the anger, but although I'm going to now include that deep heartbreak, it seeks resolution in improvement and virtue. Fuels the drive toward perfection. But I love that phrase, seeks resolution in improvement and virtue. And for the one-to-one, it's seeking it outside first, until you've clearly developed the practice which you have to see how it's arising as pain inside of you and where. Some of my question though, because I'd also like to just paint a realistic picture in some ways.
I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that it's just in relationship, because I've done a ton of work on. I see myself as the problem, but I'm hoping that the partnership will help me see that in myself.
Right. Thank you. And I know in our conversation today and in our friendship that's what you were, when we've had our moments, that's where there was the loss of the loss of connection or the loss of intimacy, because I can now see you wanted me to meet you. And I, as a 6 at that time, was more so trying to protect myself from feeling the anger. And then I missed you in that until I was able to come back, because I love you. That's the truth.
Apparently I missed you until I was able to get soft enough to let it, yeah.
But I've always felt and said to you that I trust your heart. And that is the thing that never had me go away altogether, is I always felt your heart. So I did want to take that opportunity to say that right now. But on a different note, but related. So I was asking about the immediacy of the knowing, because, as part of the belly triad, 9s, sometimes if you ask a 9 a question, it's been used sometimes of, if you drop a penny in a well, it takes a little bit of time for the penny to get to the bottom of the well, so that, the 9s can be with that, and they sometimes need space to be able to articulate their knowing. I'm going faster than that. I'm going faster than that most of the time. Right.
I'm looking for sort of light rail speed. It's like, if you're willing to hang with me, we can process it, as quickly as possible. I will go as deep, as fast as I can.
Uh-huh. And I think this is where 1s and 6s can be similar. 1s are, even though the belly type, are quicker in the mind, very strategic, brilliant, absolutely brilliant minds. So you've got the benefit of being a belly type, but also with an intelligent, agile mind that's really working overtime in the pursuit of that resolution.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
I think of it as the reunion.
Yes.
In pursuit of the reunion.
Pursuit of the reunion. I love that. Well, let's see if Odelia has anything to say. Thank you. We kind of covered a couple beautiful, many beautiful things when Annalisa was sharing. But one is the power of the anger, how it lives in you, maybe what fuels it in you. Maybe it's how do you recognize anger or anything related to that conversation, Odelia?
So it's a question if you talk about the past or the present, because I feel a big difference in that.
If you can compare the two, I know you and Annalisa have done so much work on yourself, as well as Kimberly in the room. So to be able to speak a little bit to the evolution would be brilliant.
All right. So as a child, I actually got feedback from one of my friends that they said, you never seem to be angry. And my experience was that I was not in touch with anger, period. And I had experiences early on where that was absolutely forbidden. My grandmother lived with us, and I remember her scolding me in a way that I knew I was never going to go into this territory again. And I was clearly quite effective in not showing any anger. And
to preserve yourself.
Right. So then as an adult, as I read Helen Palmer's Enneagram book, I felt so connected with what it said about the 1, except the anger didn't quite register for me. And so it has been a journey of diving deeper into the control and contractions
Mm-hmm.
I was holding,
Mm-hmm.
and discovering what Annalisa said so beautifully, the heartbreak underneath it,
Mm.
and the disappointment, but then also the anger that I felt I should have gotten something better than this.
Mm-hmm.
And so in my process now, I feel much more connected actually with the one-to-one of being very aware of the movement of energy through my body that has at times an expression of anger. And
When do you notice it?
when or where?
Where?
I would say also my belly and my chest.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel also an uprising of energy in me. And let me see. And a very strong intention to not dismiss it, because I see that then it turns inward and it really doesn't serve me. It creates a certain loss of energy if I do not honor the anger. And it feels now more as if the parts where I felt hurt were like as if you punch, a car and you get a dent. And now I am pushing back from the inside and claiming my own space. And that feels much more empowering and honoring of who I am, instead of the anger being shifted or controlled under the belief of wanting to be good, and that anger is outside what is accepted and good.
Clear. Thank you. I'm receiving that right now.
Yeah, I mean, I find it fascinating what you have offered and what Kimberly and Annalisa spoke about. It has been very, very valuable to me.
You're welcome. Thank you. It almost feels like that anger is becoming this informed friend,
Yes.
an informative friend. There's a
Yes.
way to embrace the power of it, to have it become maybe a magic carpet ride to point 7.
It can't. Yeah, anger can be that. It can be a signpost.
Yes.
Yeah, it can be like, oh, time to self reflect, or to investigate within, to drop in. Oh, is there anything you could maybe be accepting of right now that you're resisting? Is there any way you might transmute that resentment into acceptance? And what might be being offered to you right now that you're, making a judgment about? Like,
yes,
when my husband is being stupid about something, that's my judgment, right? He's like, oh, that is so asinine. Why would he put that planter in that spot? It doesn't fit there. It's like, oh, what an interesting idea for the planter. It's like, I wonder what he was thinking when he put it there. That is the instant movement for me from the criticism and the judgment.
mm-hmm.
Is to be in inquiry, just to be
Yes.
in like, well, I might be right because people are going to trip over it and kill themselves because the planter's there. So I could be right about that. But it might also be interesting to see what he was thinking, because what he was thinking was, it'll be the first thing they see, and it's so beautiful. Look at all those flowers. Isn't that sweet? I mean, why would you want to judge that or make that wrong? Both are fine and wonderful, and there is no right or wrong. And that's what anger can actually set me up to appreciate.
Yeah.
If I don't necessarily act on the anger, you don't necessarily act on it or repress it, but just use it as a curiosity moment.
Right. I also often ask myself, what unmet need is coming out in the arising of the sensation of anger? And usually there is for me an unmet need. And if I authentically care for that, it also shifts it very much.
Mm-hmm.
That's one thing I have tracked. The other thing I have tracked is I definitely had a lot of self-righteousness. I think it was very important for me to educate myself and learn so that I knew the right way. And the right way I would want to put on myself as well as on others. And a huge shift that has occurred is the movement from that towards authenticity and meeting myself or meeting whoever I'm with the curiosity, with identifying what is really happening and being with that in the moment instead of living in the gap of comparing what is to what I think should be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And for me, there is this true humility coming up. I'm working with the Qigong community, and our teacher talked about when we lower ourselves, that everything comes to us. And he says, all rivers go into the ocean. They don't stay up on the mountaintop. And the mountaintop, he connected with arrogance. But the lowering is just being open to life. And so I have seen when I am not putting my reference system onto the situation, but I am just observing with curiosity, with humility, what life wants to unfold, that it is so much more delicious. It flows so much smoother. There is so much more connection with myself, with others, and with really the world around me.
Yeah. What you're saying is helping me also to say in this moment that when that kind of acceptance is happening that you're describing, there's a sweetness in that heals the heartbreak for me.
Yes.
There's a sweetness in that it does like a salve for the heart, and the tenderness of that awareness is it's the reunion.
Yeah. Yes.
I think that's the essence of the serenity for the one, for this one. I think that really is how serenity happens for me, is when that quality of acceptance accesses that kind of tenderness, and it's very very,
Mm.
then from there flows the peace.
And that's the one in touch with,
And then you're in the ocean again.
right. That's the inherent goodness, the nobility, the sacredness, which is the back to the holy idea and the virtue of what the one's nature, true nature, is it's the greatest gift. That's truly what you're the harbinger of.
Mm.
Mm.
We it's 8:19. So typically we go till 8:30. I know we're over when we said we would be doing the interview. But are you both game for 10 more minutes?
Yes.
Oh, of course.
Okay.
Could I jump in for a minute?
Yes, I was just going to open to the room for questions. So
This is really maybe like an aha moment for me, but when you asked, I believe it was Annalise, I'm not sure, where did she feel the anger in her body? This is the first time I've been aware that I feel the anger in my heart. And that makes me feel really sad because that's got to be so unhealthy. Is that correct?
Annalisa, can you speak to that?
I wasn't sure what you were asking, what you were saying. It was
I guess I wasn't, well, I was just saying out loud that I became aware at this moment that where in the body do I feel my anger?
Oh.
I feel it. This is the first time I realized I feel my anger in my heart. And I think just being aware of that, it made me think how unhealthy to feel your anger in your heart.
I guess I would imagine. Yeah, as you say it, I know that the tension that I associate with my anger, the tension around the anger, the tension. There's tension. That's what I feel in my heart, is a tension that goes with both with the repression and the expression.
I feel heartbreak, almost like actually both of the other women mentioned the heartbreak.
Yeah, the heart.
Anger turns to heartbreak.
Yeah, the grief. They say grief is a combination of hurt and anger and sadness, and I think that there is an element to oneness that is grief. And as I get older and as I age of life, and I realize how very little I can control, and how I can't fix anybody or anything, I'm more and more in touch with the heartache and the heartbreak, and I think there's a way to be more and more spacious through breath practices and meditation and qigong and all of that, so that the channel can get bigger to hold and accommodate the grief. But if I don't allow grief to be a part of my everyday life and I resist it, then I'm tense and I'm miserable, and I think that isn't healthy. I think that can be hard on the heart, physical heart.
And there's actually
Thank you.
Can you come over? I don't think we can hear you.
There's I heard her speak. She's a cardiologist here in San Diego. And she's talked about heartbreak syndrome and told a story of one of her patients who was sent to her, referred by his regular doctor. He went in for a routine exam. And apparently his major arteries in his heart were blocked, and he needed to have open heart surgery. And this woman, Dr. Guarneri is her name, she was saying that she was really puzzled because she's very an integrative MD, and she said he was the picture of perfect health. 40-something, didn't smoke, active lifestyle, presumably, enjoyed his work, gainfully employed, good diet. When she was, are you married? Yes. Children? He stopped and looked at the floor, and he almost whispered that they had one child, a son, and on his, I think it was his 5th birthday, they bought him a bicycle with the training wheels, and they lived in a cul-de-sac, and the child was riding around and around the neighborhood cul-de-sac, and there was a big delivery truck that came into the street, didn't see the child, and backed over him and killed him. And she said that, and he was a runner, the man, that's right, he was a runner, a marathon runner. And she said that is the point at which he started to run. He was literally running away from his grief, which was an intolerable space. And so relevant, Maureen, to your comment, and thinking, well, this can't be healthy. I think, the feeling of anger showing up in the heart is pointing to the deeper heartbreak. And what Annalisa said was, perfect, which is, we have to cultivate the ability to have a large enough field of awareness that isn't just mental, but it is, emotional and physical, spaciousness, image, the sense of being more spaciousness to accommodate the emotion that can otherwise feel overwhelming.
And I think it's not just accepting the emotion that's overwhelming, but accepting that life isn't fair and trucks run over children and your parents don't get you, and you really, for the one to accept that level of imperfection is a huge accomplishment, goal, effort, whatever you want to call it. I mean, that is the practice of the one, is to get spacious.
Yes.
Enough, I think, to open to really, you understand, you said it perfectly. You said it exactly. It's wow, it's just like that really defines that really defines it for me. That's such a perfect story. How much can you hold what appears to be imperfect, and hold that even a child being run over by a truck has its place in the ultimate, field of, of life and love. Even, there's no right or wrong. It's just the isness of it. That's a really big deal for a one.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
For me to even
Thank you.
to continue.
I just said thank you.
I just wanted to continue with the heartbreak discussion. For me to get even remotely near enough to that in myself, I had to, I started to recognize this immensely painful feeling that I would get every time I saw or heard of either an animal or a child being hurt, mistreated. And I've always been very empathic, so I easily picked that. But it was the innocence and the vulnerability of animals and children that made me aware that what I was feeling in them, I was actually feeling in myself. And that was the avenue for me to come back to that heartbreak in myself. And to this day, That's really my, you know, I just really feel that acutely. And so, I mean, just, you know, through knowing that we're all energetic beings, you know, whatever we resonate with in another, the only reason we can do that is because we're embodying that in ourselves. So, yeah, finding space for that too.
I think up there with the serenity, and that is where the acceptance is. It's a blend of the both.
I'm curious about the story of the 40-year-old runner. Like, is and the heartbreak syndrome? Is that something that she's written about, and there's a book about it, and he's okay now? And
Yeah, he had surgery, and
oh, he did. Okay.
He did recover, but she does a lot of sort of counseling, you know, as a cardiac surgeon, because she's addressing all dimensions. And she said, you know, you're going to end up back on my OR table if you don't go through the breathing. You've got to do the breathing.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
And I just want to, we have Roxanne and Alex in here. Would you have any questions for any of the panelists? Yeah? No?
I'm just looking at all the parallels. I mean, I spent half the day writing about these themes. I mean,
really?
Almost exactly the stuff. And to hear embodied, mature women on the path of helping others recover, which I am too, is so cathartic. No, I keep.
You want to see her?
Sure. I am Roxanne.
Hi.
Thank you for all your shares, and Kimberly. And this has just been so cathartic. I was saying that earlier today I was just really absorbed in writing. I'm a 9 with 1 wing, still working out the subtype stuff, but essentially help others in a recovery process as well. But I've been very introspective in it for a while and not taking clients for a while, getting a new level of hearing, you know, to be more present with the heartbreak and anger. It's just so, you know, on time. And I guess one thing that Annalisa, something appealed to me to ask you about when you're working with your partner and being able to wonder, well, you know, not from a perfectionist place, but what could he be offering? What if he is wrong and it's a dangerous situation? So, you know, like my partner never puts his seatbelt on, and then he drives with just one hand, and he doesn't understand that it makes me sick, you know, on that energy level, because I've been in the whatever, and it feels like a rebellion, and I could see all of day long about him, but then nothing has changed it over 22 years. So I'm finally at this place where, what does taking care of myself look like with that? You know, because when my neighbors know when Mama's upset. I mean, I tell them, don't leave the windows open because I have something to say, you know. But in terms of a moving car where it's unsafe and so got any tips?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess my attempt with my partner would be, you know, I would probably start with, you know, wanting him to put a seatbelt on, but I would eventually get to how vulnerable I feel when he doesn't wear a seatbelt, and how afraid I am of losing him, and how angry I am that he doesn't give a shit about that, you know, and because the hurt is what really drives it, and I'm really actually pissed off that he doesn't care, or he's not demonstrating enough care for himself that, you know, I really need him, and I really want him to be in my life, and it hurts desperately that doesn't seem to be as important to him, that he actually be here for me too. That he actually, that I, you know, the reverse, however, you know, that I have something to offer him too.
Right. Well, but it turns that his defense mechanism is to turn it on as it's a control issue on me.
Well, then the next layer after that.
Sure.
Yeah.
I didn't create.
Then the next layer after doing the vulnerable thing is accepting that that's not what, I'm not going to get that. I'm not getting the mother love feast. I'm not getting him to be different. You know, there's a place for dead children, dead husbands, dead, you know, parents. There's a, like, that may, and then I have to decide if then I want to be in a relationship with that.
Right. Which is, you know,
without judging it as wrong. It's like, it's perfectly fine for people to not wear their seatbelts.
It seems to that one aspect of me so unnecessary, you know, or stupid to end something, you know, like that otherwise is so there. And I have to say, the more I'm working through other levels of caring for myself at, you know, in bolder terms, and it's just, his learning curve is just different. But he is starting to be energetically more open, less resistant. I just don't know if it's going to happen this lifetime, you know. But yeah, but back to the real root of it is the heart betrayal, you know, and not turning that inward on myself. That's what really was helpful tonight, to hear other women speaking in terms of how this is their journey in the landscape of their type. And thank you.
And how acceptance is the doorway to one of the doorways to be with awareness, this heartbreak, being okay, to first be with it.
A real quick question for you, Gerise.
Can you just come over just because we can't hear?
I'm just curious about the compatibility of one with other types. You know, what is the better than, less than?
So Kimberly's asking about the compatibility of one with other types, and
are you in a partnership, Adelia?
Yes.
Are either of you in partnerships? Yeah.
Just with my dog.
Oh.
My dog. Yeah. I don't know what type he is. He's a Gemini, is all I know.
I think he's a counterphobic 6.
I think he might.
Do you know what your partner is, Adelia?
My partner is a 9, probably a 1-to-1 9, and we have been together this summer for 40 years. And I feel we are in certain ways on opposite ends, but we have used that to really both open up to the part that did not come easy for us. And it has been an incredible gift. And I feel that what is shared is our desire for personal growth and mutual support. And so in that context, whatever has arisen as difficulty has really become the stepping stone towards a deeper exploration and towards connecting with deeper internal resources.
Beautiful.
So in terms of type and subtype, and I know you're newly identifying with self-preservation, what would you say has been more important in terms of connecting at this level?
I think one of the things we talked about last night was that Mike has always had more drive and energy in certain ways. So, for example, he loves to go dancing. He has become a dance instructor and dedicated a lot of time to it. He loves to go out to the movies or concerts. And for me, the need for quiet time, time in nature, time with my Qigong practice and meditation is really essential. And I think one of my pain points was that I was comparing myself with him and falling short and feeling, I am not up at this level. And so that has been difficult at times. And so, yeah, it has been a process of self-acceptance. I think for a while I was just fighting it, and I was not honoring my internal messages and overriding it with the ideas of what I should look like, what it should look like.
That's the one internalizing the imperfection, right? That he's somehow got it right and you have somehow got it wrong.
And then you're going to force and use that tension to fix yourself and improve yourself, but you're getting further away from serenity and acceptance.
Right.
There tends to be now from over my time studying, right? Really, any conscious couple can can be with each other, and certainly I feel like more understanding about the subtypes is going to foster closer intimacy and communication and being able to meet each other's needs. And having said that, there are a lot of 1 in 3 couples. 1 in 3s and 9s and 1s.
About
1 in 5. I'm sure they're out there.
That's a little bit of a hard thing. That's like I think that's a less likely, but I think it doesn't matter. I've heard some people say, I think Beatrice what's her name? Beatrice Chestnut. That's such a great name, Beatrice Chestnut. It sounds like something children's book. She, I think, said that it matters more that the subtypes match than that the types. So that if you have a 1-to-1 5 and a 1-to-1 1, it's a more likely fit than a self-pres 5 and a 1-to-1 1. That might be a disaster. But a 1-to-1 5. A 1-to-1 5, and there that could actually like be a super workable thing,
right?
With a 1-to-1 1, yeah. So it's very interesting how the subtype really influences the flavor.
Well, beautiful. Well, I think we're at a perfect closing place, and this has been extraordinary. Wow is all I can say.
Was it perfect?
It was beyond perfect. You went off the perfect scale. I and here in all of my years with the Enneagram, I am leaving this meeting with you both, with you all, with this just this deep appreciation for the gigantic heart of the one, and how the heartbreak is the place of reunion, place of healing, and bringing the acceptance to that is illuminating. So may we all be reunited and healed. And thank you for your presence. Thank you for your friendship and your love. And Just delicious to be with you tonight.
Thank you, Gerise.
Thank you. Good night.
Very much, everyone.
Thank you, Kimberly. Thank you, Kimberly, for your help and for your home. For sharing your artwork. That was really beautiful. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Gerise. Okay, we'll be in touch.
Good night,
Good,
everybody.
good night.
Good
Adele.
night. Good night.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Be safe. Bye-bye. You too.